Welcome to the Unshakable Foundation's meeting of Cocaine Anonymous. This is a main share meeting, and today it's with great pleasure and much gratitude that we welcome Tim Kay, who's come along to share on the topic of prayer and meditation for up to 40 minutes, after which we will open up for the Q&A portion of the meeting. Tim, thanks for coming. It's over to you.
Thanks very much. I'm Tim. I'm a recovered addict. It's very good to be here in this meeting. I'm feeling a little bit intimidated. There's a lot of people here, and a lot of time at my disposal, which is I get kind of accustomed to rattling stuff out, talking really fast, cramming as much as I can into 10, 12, 15 minutes. So I will be mindful to try and be a little bit more considered than I can often be when I'm speaking in meetings. Usually in a meeting, my motivation is to, get as much as I can out about, not so much about my drinking or using, but about the solution and about, where I see and how I see the solution as it's set out in the big book. I will say a little bit about what earned me my seat in CA and my story, but I won't go into great length about that. I first encountered CA in 1995 when I telephoned a helpline in the UK. I'd been to a 12-step fellowship prior to that in 1990, but had walked out of the door. And when I phoned the helpline in 1995, I was asked if I'd done on with Charlie and run out of money, and if that was why I was calling. And I kind of took offence, and I didn't like the cut of the guy's jib on the phone. I didn't like his accent, and I put the phone down pretty quick, and then spent another 6 years trying to manage the condition under my own steam, failing miserably, which is what I'd done for the previous 5 years since I went to the other fellowship. So by the time I came into CA proper in 2001, I'd had 11 years experience of serial relapsing, looking people in the eye and really meaning, being sincere about wanting to stop and being totally incapable of doing so for more than a matter of days, or I think of all mind altering substances, probably 2 weeks at the most in those 11 years. And over those 11 years, things getting harder, worse than they had even done in 1990, when I'd hit my first rock bottom of homelessness, no money, and losing my mind. And I kind of got my shit together again in 1990, and then built up another life before 2001, by which time it had all come crashing down again. And I crawled into the meetings in Chelsea at World's End in London, desperate for a solution. And one of the first voices I heard was the same guy that had been on the helpline, because I recognised that kind of, sort of slightly it's a bit rich for me to say a knobby twang. I've got one myself anyway, but a kind of, posh knobby twang to his accent. And I was like, oh God, it's him. And it was the same guy. He was taking one of the first meetings I went to, in World's End. And it was in Cocaine Anonymous that I was gifted with the information that it was all mind-altering substances, and that was the missing piece, one of the missing pieces of my experience during the 11 years, because I was trying to stop using cocaine by using MDMA and then et cetera, and kind of spinning around various drugs, and thinking that if I hadn't had any coke for 2 or 3 weeks, that would mean that I wasn't a coke addict, even if I'd been, dropping handfuls of pills at the weekend and drinking, 6 to 10 pints a day during the week. I thought, well, then if I stop drinking and I'm just taking the pills, well, I'm not an alcoholic. And if I stop taking the pills and I just smoke loads of weed, then I'm not addicted to the pills, and so on and so on. It kind of just endless, like a pinball in a pinball machine, bouncing around from one substance to another. And I was so pleased to hear the reading in CA about being masters of concealment and of moving from one drug to another, because it told my story exactly. I was also very, very pleased to be invited to look around the room and see that what was in the people that were in the room were the people that were escaping a terrifying drug habit. I used to be in the habit at every meeting I went to, whenever I heard that reading, of quite consciously turning my head around and looking at every single face in the room in order to allow that to sink in. And The other information, of course, that I was given in CA that was a little unwelcome was that the real solution to the insane obsession that I realised that I suffered from was actually intervention by a higher power, and that was a bit of a shock in the sense that I was the son of an Anglican priest. I grew up in a very orthodox Christian background. My poor father, bless him, was probably a candidate for Alcoholics Anonymous. He died quite young. I was brought up in an environment of a roller coaster of quite a lot of debauch, drinking and table thumping and crying and mixed with this weird kind of message of love and peace and understanding and compassion while I was being screamed at. So things are I was a little bit at odds with the idea of God. But again, I'm so grateful to the writers of the Big Book who, even though they were kind of moving from the Oxford Group, a fairly hardline religious body, into what could have become a temperance movement if it wasn't careful. They actually clearly stated at the top of page 47 that when they spoke to me of God, they meant a God of my understanding, and that saved my life. Because if I'd been compelled to sign up to a God of someone else's understanding, I don't think I'd be sitting here today. Being allowed to explore for myself my relationship with a higher power, once I had at least admitted that there probably was one, and had admitted that running things under my own steam had achieved little or nothing. In fact, it had got me in 2001 to homelessness yet again, to unemployment, unemployability, and to near bankruptcy, and worst of all, repeated bouts of psychosis. I'm not one of those people that went flat out right from the beginning of my using. I got into trouble right from the beginning, but the last 2 years of my using were brutal, and they really, really warped my mind, and I was suffering deeply when I came into the rooms with paranoia and psychosis that took a while to leave me. And if I'm honest, even today, 24 years, 9 months or whatever since my last mind-altering substance, I can still fall foul of that sense of cocaine-induced psychosis and paranoia every now and then if I'm not on my game. The topic I chose today was prayer and meditation. It's clearly stated in the book that it's very, very important to us. And the book itself sets out, a series of practices for us if we don't have any. It also steers us in the direction of either readopting or adopting practices from a faith that we may have followed or come to follow as well. And it urges us to look to see where religious people are right. I struggled with that because, I was very, very good at seeing and pointing out with great delight and some violence where religious people were wrong. I was a textbook character from the Big Book. I mean, my dad was a vicar, and one of the characters is the son of a priest. And then you turn over the page, and it starts talking about us being actors. And at the time that I came in, I was a professional actor as well. So I was like, "What is this in book? How dare they be talking about me, the son of a priest, and professionally wearing the masks that I'm now being told I wear in my life?" And once again, I had to get over myself with that stuff and realise that whilst the book was about me, it was also about all of you lot as well, and it was about us collectively, and that I'm not particularly special, crazy, wild, or different when I'm in a room of Cocaine Anonymous. Still has to be said that I think in the outside world, with the great unwashed, I'm pretty special and different compared to a lot of them. You only have to sort of break into conversations about addiction and matters spiritual, and you soon realise there's a huge void between my understanding and positioning on that and a lot of people in the outside world, outside of the fellowship. Having said that, I also have a great deal in common with the vast majority, if not all, of humanity out there, because that is the source of the spiritual malady for me that's talked about in the book. It's a human condition. The thing that sets me apart from the rest of humanity is the physical allergy and the obsession. I'm then left with this terrible dilemma where, in order to seek a spiritual solution to my problem, I then have to work through all of the spiritual problems that are in between me and that solution. But I share that in common with humanity in general, and it is largely from humanity in general that I'm able to be inspired by all kinds of instruction, guidance, and examples in terms of prayer and meditation. We are blessed in this fellowship in that we inherited and decided to continue to use as a basic text the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm very grateful to the pioneers. My understanding of the origins of the CA is that in an AA meeting in Hollywood, cocaine addicted alcoholics were kind of boring alcoholics in the meeting by talking about cocaine all the time, and they were effectively asked to leave and go and do something on their own, and they respectfully asked if they could take the book and other materials with them. And I think the alcoholics said, yes, please take and go and talk about your stuff somewhere else, not here. But I'm delighted that we have this book to use for our own program of recovery. As it says in our readings, it's been proven that the 12-step recovery program works, and that's why we do that. I mean, sadly, it doesn't work for everybody, and the stats aren't great. Not only the stats are hard to find, but they're also not great. Part of that is because, of course, we have to jump through so many hoops in the process to actually work and engage with all of the 12 steps, live in the program in order to stay sober, and that's a big ask. I consider myself very, very blessed, and I'm very, very grateful that this number of years on, I'm still clean and sober. But it's not just because of this kind of abundant grace of a God. It's also because of the legwork that I have actually put in, and I give myself credit for that, and for the decision to stick around, which I'm very, very sad to say so many of us do not do. And what happens, especially with the gateway of step 11, is that we get lit up with spiritual practices, with our prayer, with our meditation. We engage with churches or with temples or with mosques or with other places of worship, and we find great comfort and reassurance and succor in those places, and then we decide that those are the places where we should be doing our 12-step work, and we turn our backs on the fellowship where we were actually given the gift. And that's why I'm still here after all these years. I'm still here because of the debt of gratitude that I have to the people who were in Cocaine Anonymous when I walked in, and who offered me help, guidance, love, and where appropriate, advice in order to help me do what they had done, which was effectively work a step 12 program so that the power of a God that I believed in could come between me and the insane idea that I could safely use any mind-altering substance. And it talks in the book around step 11 of the importance of not resting on our laurels, and it counters, and I think it's always worth pointing out, I mean, I get into hot water in some meetings. It's a funny old world, isn't it? But you can actually go to a meeting these days and say that you are recovered, and that be a controversial thing to say, and you can be picked. And I've had people say, "Oh no, I'll never be so arrogant as to say I'm recovered. I do the steps as in the book, the big book, and that's why I know that I'll always be recovering." And I'm like, I don't think we read the same book. I don't even think we even looked at the very first page before the book even starts, where it says the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. It's like, wow, I don't get it, because it's not even an issue, but yet in some quarters it is, and I'll get denounced as being cocky, arrogant, setting a bad example to newcomers by saying that I'm recovered and that I'm setting myself up for a fall. The counterbalance to the claim that I'm covered lies in step 11 in the big book, where we were given a very, very serious warning. And that warning is that we are not cured, that what we have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. So, yes, I am recovered. I absolutely am recovered, and being recovered is the gift that is available to any and all of you who are new and or struggling. Recovered from the hopeless state of mind and body. Am I an enlightened being? Probably not. No. I'm doing my best. I'm doing the best that I can to actively pursue a path of prayer and meditation in order to build that pillar to support that aspect of keeping myself in a spiritual condition. And that's why I also work with others. It's why I do service in the fellowship of CA, and it's why I attend meetings. With all those things in place, and if I'm actively engaging in all of those, then I've got a much better chance of remaining in a fit spiritual condition. And if I remain in the fit spiritual condition, continue to take inventory, continue to run that inventory past another addict, continue with my program of prayer and meditation, continue with my service to others, then, the idea is that I will stay recovered each and every day. If I stop doing these things tomorrow, I am just as likely as any other person in this room to pick up. I'm by no means fooled or deluded about the fact that I am like a person who's lost his legs. I will never, ever, ever be able to use any mind-altering substance with any kind of safety whatsoever. When I put one in, all bets are off. That was the sum total of my experience during those 11 years relapsing. Nothing has changed my thinking around that over 24 and a half plus. I mean, I'm like a toddler. When toddlers say they're 3.5, whatever, I'm like, I'm 24 in 9 months. Do you know what I mean? Desperately lurching towards 25 years and the golden chip and all the rest of it. But, it really doesn't, to some extent, time is irrelevant. But on the whole, the people that usually say that time doesn't matter haven't got very much, which, and bless them. And, I get it. I can relapse tomorrow. No problem. I get that. If I relax, if I get complacent, if I stop doing what I'm supposed to do, it's freely available to me. I'm going through a particularly difficult time at the moment with a relationship breakup and other stuff going on domestically. And, the stall is set out for a perfect relapse. I'm even the treasurer of Bristol District of CA, and I've got a CA debit card. And the first thing when I took the debit card out of the envelope was I just saw myself chopping up Charlie in a hotel room and doing a couple of big tram lines and then getting on the phone for a couple of girls to come and join me. And I'm thinking, wow, man, this is at 24 years and 9 months. Don't worry, Isaac, not going to happen, not today. Anyway, you don't have to grass me up to the rest of the committee. But the thought came to my mind, that insane idea was there. But the grace of God and my connection with my higher power is firmly between me and that kind of insane thinking. And that is insane. Physically, I have ongoing heart failure. I've had 2 heart attacks in recovery. If I go on a cocaine bender, I'm going to die. I really am going to die now. I mean, I would have died in 2002, more than likely as not, but now there's absolutely no doubt at all about that. Sometimes when we talk about jails, institutions and death, and some of us, even though we've been in the gutter injecting into our groins, will sit in the meeting and say, I think you're being a bit dramatic there. And it's like, well, no, this is actually what happens. And I'm very much aware that this could happen to me. So today, my prayer and my meditation practice are even more significant, if that's possible, than they ever have been. And my journey into that process, I mean, I think prayer, I was pretty well schooled. You're all thinking, my God, at last he's got to the topic. Prayer is very, very important to me, even when I was using. I was one of those people that would pray in court. I was one of those people that would pray while I was being strip searched at customs. I was one of those people that would pray when the dealer wasn't answering his phone. You know, I had all kinds of prayers at all kinds of times of extreme desperation. And it was pretty straightforward for me to actually turn to prayer in my recovery. And although we're not actually guided to in the book, one of the things that I did do immediately was I had myself a Tibetan prayer reel, and I wrote in it a prayer asking for me to stay sober for that day. I put it into that prayer wheel and I rolled it in my hands for about 12 minutes every single day during the first 6 to 9 months of my sobriety. You know, on its own, I don't think that's why I stayed sober. I think that had more probably at that point to do with actually getting a sponsor, getting a copy of the big book, opening that copy of the big book, reading what was in it, and then putting into action the prescribed actions under the guidance of my sponsor, and then getting connected to a power greater than me through the work in the 12 steps. And there, the key prayer was the step 3 prayer to begin with for me. And I was one of those people that didn't even notice really while I was reciting the step 3 prayer to myself endlessly every day once I'd done step 3. And my step 3 was fantastic. It was on a beach in Brighton at about 2 a.m. During a huge thunderstorm with like crashing waves. And I shouted the step 3 prayer to my sponsor who was standing on this beach in the darkness. And I'm really glad that it carried that kind of weight and it had this sense of a kind of battering and cleansing from the sea and from the elements of nature, which was really quite a remarkable, strong experience. I mean, by all means, one can just fall to one's knees at the foot of the bed in the sponsor's dry house or whatever and read the prayer there. But, you know, I went for Brighton Beach and it was an absolute knockout. And it remained me connected to the step 3 prayer, even though I didn't even really notice that a lot of the information and the call in the step 3 prayer was for my difficulties to be taken away so that my victory over them would bear witness to those that I would help. You know, and it is amazing that without contemplation and without meditation, the prayers can actually become pretty much meaningless. So, you know, I've had those phases in my recovery where I would give my sponsor a merry list. It happened to me only a few years ago. I was spot checked by a new sponsor who said, "So what do you do in the mornings?" I was like, "I get up in the morning, I read something from A Quiet Peace, I read something from As Bill Sees It, I read something from the big book, I do my step 3 prayer, I do my step 7 prayer, I do a step 11 prayer, and then I meditate." And he said to me, "Well, yeah, but by about 11 o'clock, how much of that has actually stuck in your head?" And I was actually, probably none of it, actually, because what I was doing was like a relentless box-ticking exercise. And the guidance I was given, which was the original guidance I was given again, was to really access the meaning of the prayers. And that segues me from prayer into meditation, because I think if we look at the background of the people that wrote the book and the time in which it was written, and it is very much a book of its time, and some of the language can be difficult for some of us, and I appreciate that. It was difficult for me. Even 24 years ago, I was kind of ranting and railing about God the One and God the He, saying it was a very patriarchal and monotheistic take on the idea. And that's when I was pointed to the top of page 47 to like, well, you know, whatever floats your boat. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, because at that point, I think I had a more plural and less gendered idea of a higher power, which was quite extraordinarily advanced and woke for a boomer of my time. I think I was going to look back and reflect on that and give myself a pat on the back there for actually being ahead of the curve with that. But that, and again, I urge anybody who struggles with those concepts to have an open mind and to take on board the fact that we are guided to have an open mind by that very same book. And so in deeper contemplation of the prayers and meditation at the time that this book was written by the people who wrote it, really, probably, more likely than not, meant contemplation, and contemplation of literature, and contemplation of prayer. So a meditation would be to contemplate, to break down, to spend time slowly reading and reflecting on every single line of a prayer rather than just knocking it out. You know, so I could get up in the morning and go, God, I offer myself to thee to build me and do me as they will. Relieve me of the bondage of self that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, the victory over them may bear witness to those I would have with thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will. Right, ding, that's that one done. Next, you know, that's recital, really. That's just learning something by rote and then churning it out. In contemplation meditation, I can really take on board what that prayer is actually saying and what I am asking of my higher power. And we can do that again with the Step 7 prayer. A very popular prayer in 12-Step Fellowship, of course, is the St. Francis of Assisi prayer. Again, as a kind of aging boomer, I was like a bit, that one was a bit tainted for me because of a prime minister who kind of misquoted it on the steps of number 10 back in the 70s, much to my ire at the time. And when I came in and people were talking about the St. Francis prayer, I was like, God dang, not that thing. No. But you know, I've got over myself with that, and one of my favorite contemplation meditations is contemplation of the words of the St. Francis prayer. When I actually pause, reflect, read a line, repeat that line to myself, reflect on the meaning of that, do that with the next line, instead of knocking out a prayer in a couple of minutes, I can spend 15 to 20 minutes contemplating the St. Francis prayer. And when I do that, something different happens. In the same way that I can contemplate any literature of spiritual significance, and I can contemplate a passage from the Big Book in that way as well. So if I read the opening of More About Alcoholism, for example, in a contemplative state, I can learn far more about what's actually being said in that passage than if I just read it out fast at a meeting or hear someone else do the same. Contemplation. So that contemplation meditation, you know, I earnestly believe that that's probably really what the writers of the book were talking about. Of course, today meditation can mean a whole load of other things as well. And, I have a meditation practice, and I have years of experience and training outside of the fellowship in matters of meditation, of all kinds of different meditations from all kinds of different faiths. Heretical to some, I know, because but I am one of those eclectic kind of spiritual people that will dive in to a faith to see what works for me and take that and use it without necessarily subscribing to that faith. So I am an adept at working in contemplation of the St. Francis prayer, but I would not describe myself as a practicing Christian. I've spent a lot of time engaging with mantra meditations from various strands of what's collectively known as Hinduism or Tantra, but I would not describe myself as a Hindu or a Tantrika. I have contemplated the multiple names. I think in Islam, I think it's 99, forgive me if I'm wrong, 99 names of God, translated from Arabic into English, and I've contemplated those, and I've conducted meditations for large groups of people where I've been reading out those names of God. I've contemplated on the 72 Hebrew names of God. I've done mindfulness meditation of conscious awareness. I've done candle meditation. I've done counting meditations. I've done other chanting meditations in Gurmukti and in Sanskrit. I have actively pursued every single kind of meditation that has been made available to me, been introduced to me, or that I have encountered in order to see what works for me. It's got so bad I even bought a Shakti mat and have effectively laid on a bed of plastic nails. It doesn't get much more daft than that. I don't know how I was doing it, but a year ago I was lying on this flipping thing for about half an hour and not feeling anything. I laid down on it just for shits and giggles a couple of weeks ago, and I lasted about 2 minutes, and I was like, what the hell is this? And how the hell did I manage to last that long last year? The reason was I did it for 56 days consistently, and you know, you do these things, you do these practices over extended periods of time. That's what happens. Just recently, I completed 40 days of Metta Bhavana, a loving kindness meditation from the Buddhist tradition. And I tell you what, things happened. Things happened. Things changed in my life as a direct result of engaging in that meditation. And yet, I'm not a Buddhist. You know, I take literally what it says in the big book about seeing where religious people are right, and not being shy to investigate any practice which may get me connected more consciously to a God of my understanding. Meditation is that important to me that I finally got around in Bristol to starting face-to-face meditation meeting that will be starting in the middle of October. I've been attending online CA meditation meetings since the beginning of COVID. You know, I went to face-to-face meditations before then. I go to meditation groups outside of the fellowship. I don't stop. I don't stop. And I urge any of you to take a guy that I was inspired by back in the day was Mark H. He's long past now, so I don't think he'll mind me breaking his anonymity and saying Mark Houston. Google the guy. He was Chris R.'s sponsor. That must have been one hell of a job while he was still alive to sponsor Chris R. I don't know. I've been accused sometimes when I've revved up my engine and I'm armed with the facts about the true nature of my condition. Believe me, I can start talking about pissing on my meeting with your goddamn war stories and all this kind of stuff. And you know, I've got a bit of Chris R in me. I listened to him for many years and got fired up by what he had to say. But I think I was probably more fired up by what his sponsor had to say. My sponsor is a chap called Lee S, by the way, in Bristol. So if you think I'm good, actually, no, you need to go and speak to him. I'm rubbish. I don't know what I'm talking about. Lee is the man who's truly armed with the facts. But Mark Houston was a great Mark H. Was a great advocate of relentless seeking, researching, experimenting, immersing in practices. He didn't just stop at one. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants in that sense, with people like that who've gone before me in this fellowship, and I'm enormously grateful to them for the work that they did, for the recordings that they made, for the workshops that they offered people, for the encouragement they gave all of us to take our prayer and meditation practice really, really seriously, because it's in the step 11 practice that I believe we really get the opportunity to address the spiritual malady. And we know that when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. Again, that's what it says in the book. I get pissed off with people who tell me that it's all very well quoting the book and blah, 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 blah. But you know what I mean? There's nothing wrong with quoting the book. So please, quote the book. Quote the book wherever you go. It's worth quoting. An awful lot of it is well worth quoting. I don't tend to quote from Two Wives, I'll be honest, because it's a little bit retro, if you know what I mean. Some of the stuff about it is a little bit odd, but the 160 odd pages that set out the program of recovery, I will quote from them until I draw my last breath. And on that note, you know, our breath is the first thing that we do that when we come into this world. It's the last thing that we do when we leave. And if you cannot do anything else when you're thinking about meditating, if you think you're one of those people that can't meditate, well, hold your nose, put your hand over your mouth, see how long you can hold your breath for, and then see how interesting breath becomes when you become very, very short of it. And then just meditate on your breathing. And as you do that, you'll become more centered in your body. And as you become more centered in your body, you will become less fixated with what's going on in your mind. One of the great lies for me about meditation is that somehow it's emptying your mind. You never empty this mind. You know, my mind is a thinking machine. It does what it's designed to do. But what I can do is cease being a slave to my mind by watching it by becoming the observer, the watcher, separate from the monkey mind and from all the terrible ideas that will come up with, like using the Bristol CA district credit card to chop out a couple of big fat tram lines and then call a couple of girls into the hotel room to entertain me for the rest of my what would then be very short life. Listen, I'm Tim, I'm an addict. I'm amazed that I actually managed to fill up 40 minutes. I hope that you've got something out of what I've said, and I'm extremely grateful for being invited here to speak at this meeting. I love you all. God bless you all, and may your spiritual journey be rich and long and fruitful. Thank you.
Who have we got? Tim, would you like to come in? Thank you.
Oh, hi everybody. My name's Tim. I'm an alcoholic and an addict. So hello family, as Mark Houston used to say. I love that. And yeah, I'm a big Mark Houston fan as well, and Dave F and Chris Raymer, and Dave is still with us, and Chris, and also is really good at communicating via email if you want their details. I've got a new sponsor recently from a referral from Dave F actually, and he's asking me to go through the work in a very different way to what I've done before. With the 12 prayers, he's asking me to rewrite one for my own personal situation every single day. So, for example, ask your Creator to show you the way of patience, tolerance, kindness, and love. And my new sponsor is asking me to rewrite that towards my own particular situation to my own wife and children. I just wondered if you also wrote out your own prayers.
Yes, I do indeed. And usually when I'm engaging in the process of two-way prayer, so particularly where, that's the kind of prayer and then meditating to see what the answer is and then running the four absolutes past the answer before then running that past another human being as well. Like you, at the very basics, I was encouraged to write my own version of the Step 3 prayer, and I'll also do that and encourage that from anybody that I sponsor and work with too. I think writing our own prayers is a really great practice, and thank you very much for bringing that up.
Beautiful. Thanks so much, Tim, for your question. Next up, we've got Martin. Come on in.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone, for your service. And thank you very much, Tim. I'm Martin. I'm a very grateful recovered addict and alcoholic, and I didn't have to drink or drug today, thanks to God, as I understand them. I identified an awful lot with you, about going into different fellowships. And nothing worked for me until I completely surrendered to what I call God today, what I understand as God. And sometimes, I can question my whole God thing. So my question to you is, when you're working with all these faiths and meditations, which one was your favourite, basically?
I think most recently my favourite has been a thing called the Kirtan Kriya, which is it's a repetition of 4 Sanskrit phrases, which is sa, ta, na, ma. It's a chanted meditation that then is whispered and then internalized, and it's carried out for either 11 minutes or 22 minutes or 33 minutes, and I prefer, being a drug addict, I prefer the 33-minute version, and I found that actually life-changing. I think a close second to that would be the Metta the loving kindness meditation. But yeah, Kirtan Kriya, Satanama. If you look that up, you can find lots of different versions of it on YouTube or in the various apps. There's a whole canon of versions of musical versions of it, but they all basically have the same ingredient, which is the repetition of Satanama, which effectively means, loosely translated to the English, birth, life, death, and rebirth.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Martin, for coming in with your question. Next up, Isaac, please.
Thanks, Ella. Hi, I'm Isaac. I am a recovered addict. Really good to be here. Thank you, everyone, being a service. And Tim, thank you so much for coming along and speaking for us today. Really good to hear you. I would Yeah, I'd love to have a conversation with you at some point about prayer and meditation. A lot there that you spoke about really resonated with me. But I'll get to my question. So, throughout the almost 25 years of experience you have exploring step 11, are there any particular bits of prayer meditation you find out of all the things you tried that you revisit often or you circle back to after trying lots of different practices out?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, obviously, there are the prayers in the book. I mean, that kind of goes without saying. Step 3 prayer, step 7 prayer, St. Francis prayer, which I talked about earlier on. Yeah, I mean, I do tend to go in cycles where I will spend, a period of months or even years with particular practices, and then they kind of drop out, and other things become more kind of en vogue for wherever my mood, I guess, wherever that is. I think one of the things that I've always done has been some kind of physical based meditation practice. So by that I mean, for example, Tai Chi, Qigong, or yoga. I spent many years as a Tai Chi practitioner, and then I switched to boxing for 12 months and then had a heart attack. So I wouldn't recommend that. I'm not sure that the two things were entirely related to each other, but I certainly regretted giving up the Tai Chi. But again, what I appreciate for some people is that those kind of the sort of energy work, although they are they're physical meditative practices, that these can be jarring for some people of some faiths. But even then, that can be extrapolated to a walking meditation, for example. So mindfully walking really slowly around, a square patch in a garden, is a meditation. So if you don't fancy getting all the gongs and the bells out and doing all the crazy kind of Eastern stuff, then, a walking meditation is great. Contemplation of nature. These are things that I've always had going on. I believe that a lot of what goes on, a lot of the things that can precipitate me back towards perilous state of relapse are trapped in the body. It's one of the things that the book doesn't talk about, I mean, in great detail, but times have changed. We have a lot more awareness of what's actually going on in terms of trauma, in terms of trauma responses, where and how we store that trauma within ourselves, how those trauma responses can actually be the spark that actually lights the flame to take us to the insane idea that we can use again. And so working with my body somatically has been something that I've done relentlessly since I was about 10 years, I would say. I kind of dabbled with it before then, but since 10 years, so for the last 14, nearly 15 years, I've been quite religious about engaging in some sort of somatic work. Heretically for some, I'm very big on yoga at the moment, and I'm training as a Kundalini yoga teacher. So, I'll sell yoga like snake oil to anybody. It fixes everything. Just do the yoga. What's the matter with you? But of course, I'm well aware that without working with others, I'd be doomed. So, yoga or not, there was a brief spell where I left the fellowship and had a very difficult time, round about the time that Tai Chi kind of peaked. My step 11 was like great. I was like bending the web of weird all over the place and everything, but I still managed to drift away from the meetings and go absolutely crackers. By the grace of God, I didn't pick up, but I did pick up every character defect going, and came back in and got my shit together pretty damn quick as well. I'm not a saint, just in case anybody hadn't noticed. Thanks for your question, Isaac. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Isaac, for your question, and Tim for your answer. Danny, come on in.
Thanks, Ella. Hi guys, my name's Danny, I'm an addict. And Tim, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it, and you had us laughing when you were talking about the bank card. That was brilliant. Yeah, brilliant share, Tim. Really enjoyed it. A lot of food for thought about prayer and meditation. And it's something that I've always wanted to delve into more, like into different practices and different forms of meditation. So yeah, really enjoyed it. I've got a two-part question for you. The first part is, how did your prayer and meditation, because you spoke about just saying the third step prayer and the seven step prayer, and I get it, I get it. That's my experience as well in the early days. But looking back now with hindsight, how did your prayer and meditation life develop as you went through the steps and removed them blocks of self? Second part is, do you go back through the steps annually or, every couple of years? Have you been back through in the time you've been in to look back at that first step and, look at your need for power? So yeah, that's it. Thanks, mate.
Yeah, okay. Working backwards because I'm terrible at retaining information. So the second part of the question, yes, I go through I don't go through the steps on a prescribed kind of annual or biannual or whatever basis, but I do and have done every time I've changed sponsors. I'm on my sixth sponsor, so that would mean that probably on average every 4 years, but it hasn't been like that because sometimes I've had the same sponsor for quite a while, and sometimes I've changed sponsors quite quickly. So that's really the benchmark I used. I also went through the steps again when I had that period of time that I touched on where I actually stayed away from meetings for a period of time and went absolutely batshit crazy without picking up anything at all other than my own ego. So I don't advocate for myself. I don't advocate doing it every year, but if I take someone on, I go through the steps with them as well, no matter what their previous experiences have been, so that we have a shared experience of that. I don't think there's a day that goes by that I don't actually revisit my step one. In terms of fundamentally acknowledging my powerlessness over all mind-altering substances. I do that in pretty much every meeting that I go to. I do that pretty much when I open my eyes every day, acknowledging the fact that I am an addict of the hopeless variety as set out in the big book, and that for me to use is to die. And that once I put one in, all bets are off. To forget that would be the beginning of the end. The thing I did learn in my experience is that I found myself in meetings at one stage in my life saying that my step one was so good that I would sooner kill myself than pick up a mind-altering substance. And then I realised I had an even more profound problem because even without using anything, I could still end it all. And that was a real wake up moment for me, I think, in my awareness. And I think that really came at probably 7 years. So I think the first 7 years of my recovery, I'd been pretty much doing it by the book. And so, my step 11 consisted of, on awakening and as I go about my day, and then retiring at night and doing lists and ticking boxes. And this is all really good stuff. I should point out that, anything that I've talked about is in addition to those basics that are set out in the book. But I think it was at 7 years when things really deepened for me in terms of the exploration in step 11, when I realised that even completely stone cold straight and sober, I would quite likely kill myself. And that realization was quite a big shock, that simply being clean, sober was not enough. And it was at that point that I became really more seriously engaged in step 11 and started listening to people like Mark H, who'd been through similar experiences, I think. I hope that answers your questions anyway. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thanks so much, Danny, for your question. Next up, we've got Michael. Come on in.
Hi, Michael, recovered addict. Thank you very much, Ella, for sharing, and thank you, Tim, for an absolutely wonderful share. I think one of the things I enjoyed the most, is like there's this bit of apprehension a little bit, where no pressure then, and then you absolutely smashed it on prayer and meditation, and you've got 24 years, but you're still human and think about using the CA bank card to knock up a couple of fat lines. It's wonderful to hear someone so far down who doesn't float down the stairs. Sorry. My question is, obviously you've got a very established prayer and meditation routine, and you're definitely in the reliant rather than compliant stage. But what would your advice be to the newcomer, or what would you say to sponsees who are trying prayer and meditation and they're just not I just don't get it. I'm just failing to connect. I'm not feeling anything. Because my go-to movie, just keep doing it. But any like proper wisdom that just opens their eyes in their heart, if you like. And thank you again, Tim. It was wonderful.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. I think some of the most helpful things I was told was that first off, there's no such thing as a bad meditation. So simply turning up with the intention and the desire to meditate is a win. Even if you ring yourself a little bell and it all goes tits up after 10 seconds, that 10 seconds is better than what anybody was, what you were doing before. I was also advised and took the advice of setting myself a space, creating a space. Even that simply, if I was just in a rented room, which I was at the beginning of my recovery, that would be, that would just be simply clearing a part of the one table in there and lighting a candle while I read the prayers. And that in itself, the act of actually setting a space is a win. In terms of struggle with silent meditation, for example, a lot of us with divergence, we can't bear the quiet, and the addict mind, fresh off the coalface as well, is a really jittery thing. It's like a gnat in terms of its attention span. It's like, and the idea of sitting in silence can be completely overwhelming, and listening, to a broken mind firing out all of its messages simultaneously can actually be a recipe for disaster, and could actually, get me out of the door if I'm in a dysregulated state. So don't be shy of using music. And by music, I don't mean, listening to, I don't know, what can I say? What kind of stuff do I listen to? If I wouldn't like to say. The embarrassment already. Don't go listening to Linkin Park. That's not going to work. Except perhaps the instrumentals. If there's no words, and it's long and it takes a while to evolve, then use music to hold the space in which you meditate. That was good advice that was given to me. And if there are words, make sure that they are, for example, back to Mark H. He would have been there meditating to monks chanting. Gregorian chanting was all the thing back in the day then. And you listen to that in Latin. If you're playing that and you can just sit in silence listening to that, something is happening. And you can slowly train yourself to simply sit and be present with others engaging in a practice over a loudspeaker or headphones, in what are effectively meditation practices. And you can take all kinds of stuff from world music, in order to support that. Simple drones, ambient tones, solfeggio tones, which are various tones allegedly pitched at various frequencies to heal, various parts of the body, that kind of stuff. If you can sit and listen to something like that for 2 minutes, that's a win. That's a win. We don't have to do all the big stuff. Great. I can sit in a silent meditation in easy pose on a cushion for 55 minutes. Big whoop. Do you know what I mean? I couldn't do that a few years ago. I couldn't even sit for 5 minutes still on a chair. And so just by turning up, acknowledging there's no such thing as a bad meditation, practicing. Above all else, go back to contemplation, meditation. Read the prayer. Read it really slowly. It'll take you 2-3 minutes instead of 30 seconds. Bingo, you just meditated. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know. Be still. Be. We just meditated on one line of one psalm.